Hello, welcome
I
everyone hello Gantuya. Welcome to a new conversation of the Altering Shifting Communing series, which is a series on international curatorial practices hosted by Call for Curators. I am Ilaria Conti. I'm the curator of the series, and after a quick summer break, I'm very happy to be resuming this series of conversations. For those who might be joining for the first time or connecting for the first time, I just want to remind briefly what this series is about. Um, and say that it is a series that was born at the beginning of 2020 somewhat, so little over a year ago actually, out of really the intention and will to create a space to communally discuss the diverse understandings and multiple possibilities and approaches to curating. And what we're trying to do throughout this series is really to create exchanges and conversations on practices that exercise critical thinking, and that place collaboration really at the center by cultivating also cross-cultural approaches. Something else that I always say about this series is that what we're doing is to look at curating also as a system of power and how this can spark change and provoke change in the social, political, and financial infrastructures that allow for contemporary art in and of itself to exist. And I'm very excited that tonight we can speak with you, Gantuya, because you have a very deep understanding also of the question of the financial structures at large. In any case, we'll get to it in a moment. Lastly, I just want to say that something that is very important that we repeat all the time for each iteration of this series is that the series really addresses the responsibilities that come with curating, and also the importance of considering not just what we do, but how we do it. So the title that we've given the series, Altering Shifting Communing, really is a statement of intent toward altering the terms of the conversation when it comes to curating, shifting ground, and most importantly, communing with each other. So because of all of this, I'm very, very happy today to welcome Gantuya Badamgarav with us today. Thank you so much for being here, although it's getting a little bit late where you are. It's the dead of the night. I want to remind those who are joining us and watching that the conversation will last approximately 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll open up to the Q&A. So for those watching through Facebook, YouTube, feel free to ask questions, write them in the comment section, and then we will address them at the end. Again, Gantuya, thank you so much for being here. As you know, the first question that I continue to ask relentlessly, because I think that we still very much need that as a starting point for the relationships that we're trying to form through this series, is how are you? Where are you? And how has this past year been? And of course, with this, you can also introduce yourself in your own words as you see fit.
mhm. Yeah, I'm from Mongolia, um, and I'm founder and director of Mongolian Contemporary Art Support Association and the founder of 976 Art Gallery. Um, and it's my pleasure to join this conversation today. And thanks, Ilaria, for invitation.
Of course.
Um, so, how I was yeah, last year, this year, last year, 1.5 years of the pandemic. It was very interesting time for me. Unexpectedly, I think for the most, maybe. Um, I remember the title of the Venice Biennale 2019. May you live in interesting
Mm.
times, and I think it was very interesting title, almost predicted whatever happening in during the last 1.5 years of the pandemic. And I, I personally see this some sort of opportunity for the reflection, for rethinking of what we are doing, and so fixing things that are left behind
Mm.
because we have been always busy with this crazy speed. And so I really appreciate the time I could afford. Um, um, Basically, we closed everything when pandemic started. We closed the gallery, stopped all exhibitions, and I also thought of stop working for the Venice Biennale because 3 editions were too much for our organization, and also lots of international activities were, um, planned. Um, we planned international travels, some performances, and lots of the curators were coming to Mongolia. Lots of, no, not lots of, like some very important curators were coming for research uh, to Mongolia, and I was really expecting to have them and introduce Mongolian contemporary art and discuss about different opportunities, but all stopped suddenly. And I it was okay for me. I felt like it was okay, and we needed to adjust to the new situation. And we moved our office to home and started working from home, and looked for different ways of working. So I really liked this circumstance, despite the suffers of others. Of course, it's difficult for many people, but I hope this new situation um, really helped the people to, stop. I mean, uh, not stop, but really slow down the speed and
Mhm.
think of what we are doing and we have been doing, and really think of the things that are surrounding us. We forget often because we are always very busy, and so I think many people found this situation in the same way as I do. So, and we actually changed the direction a little bit of our activities, and so we can talk about this later. So I've been fine, completely fine. I'm not
So,
speaking much in English, so my English is, I have so much of difficulty speaking English now.
and
You know,
I'm thankful that you were willing to engage in this conversation. Something that I always say when preparing for this series with the speakers that we invite and so on and so forth are two very important things for me. One is that this is meant to be informal. It's an informal conversation because we're entering your home. It's in the middle of the night. So appreciate the time. We appreciate the time and knowledge that you're willing to share with us. And the other thing is that we all, of course, have to use English as sort of a common language, but that doesn't mean that we need to master it. That's another form of linguistic imperialism that it's good to subtract ourselves from. So please do not worry about this throughout our conversation. Whatever comes out, we're appreciative and we are enjoying it. And the rest is for the grammar teachers. We don't care about that. I wanted to sort of pick up on something that you were saying before about sort of this deep reflection about the pace and the nature of the work that we do and how we do it, why we do it, and so on and so forth. Because you have a very interesting biography. I was very interested when I first met you, when we were talking a little bit about your background, because it is not so common. But I also think that I am sure, I think by now, but I want to ask you maybe later also about this. I think that it has been a very interesting standpoint, vantage point from which to look at curating. And so here goes my question. So we mentioned it also in your biography. You are an economist, or were an economist turned curator. So your first sort of professional engagement and endeavor was in the field of economy. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that part of your path and also how it has informed your decision to turn to contemporary art and how it has also informed what you've been doing ever since. Because, as I said, it's very unique in a very special moment of history, I guess, for Mongolia, but also for the global, um, sort of balance of the Soviet bloc and all these things. And so I wanted to ask you whether you could share a little bit for those that are with us today how you came to contemporary art.
yeah, I feel like it's my second life. I'm actually not a mature curator. I'm very young. As a curator, I'm very young in this world. But many people assume that I'm, mature in this sector, but indeed it's not. Um, I I got my bachelor degree in Russia, St. Petersburg University of Finance and Economics, and I had a major in macroeconomic planning, and most of my time for study was happened during socialist time. And when I was graduating, socialist system was already collapsed. So shortly after 1990, I graduated my school, and then I did my master's degree in United States in Williams College in macroeconomic policy. And so after graduating my schools, um, I was working for international agencies like Asian Development Bank, U.S. Agency for International Development, and mostly collaborating with the Minister of Finance or Minister of Trade, um, and so on. Um, I was very much connected, interested in art and music since I was a child, and um, I was torn between art and math. I was very good at both. I was good in mathematics. I have bronze medal from National Mathematical Olympiad, and I participated in International Mathematical Olympiad. And I was so much interested. My heart was into the art and music. But during socialist time, growing up in a very small town, I didn't have any, anything. And I didn't meet anyone who excelled in music or in art because our small town was a kind of very boring place. And socialist system really discouraged artistic people, and there was nothing much interesting, so I just didn't know what I would do when I study art or music or design or whatever. So I thought becoming an economist would be the easiest for me because I was very sure that I can enter to economic school and graduate and work in this field. But my heart was somewhere else. So because of that, when I was studying in St. Petersburg, I used to visit this Hermitage. Like I don't know how many times I lost the number in other museums, and the St. Petersburg is such a beautiful city, and so I used to visit the Mariinsky Theater very often. Used to see opera and ballet, and also attending different performances and concerts and so on. So, and even when I started working in Mongolia and during my travels to different countries, the first thing I would do it was looking at the museums. Um, what kind of museums these places have? I would look first even before I start planning my work, actual work. So I used to spend lots of time when I was traveling to different countries by work and by on my vacation. And I used to visit museums. I think I visited like maybe 200 or 300 museums. I didn't count, but I visited many countries for different continents. And so every time I go to any country, I visit museums, all museums almost. So I was so much engaged with art, like as a visitor, but I never had any experience of working in this field. So shifting to art was something that was very natural, very natural. There was no any surprise to change my field of work. And just there was one request from my previous partners by business, requested me to open gallery together, and they offered investment for opening the gallery, and I thought, oh, okay, I can, and I can dedicate some of my time, and then I can do my economics work, maybe 70% of my time, and I can dedicate a rest of time for the gallery. And we opened the gallery, and suddenly realized that it requires so much of time and dedication, not only 100%, like 200% of
Mm-hmm.
my time. So I needed to work really hard for running the gallery. And in 2 months, wow,
Oh,
earthquake.
is this an earthquake?
Yeah,
You okay? You need to
wow.
go?
No,
You
it
sure?
stopped. Yeah, it stopped.
Oh
Wow.
my God. Yes, I saw it.
Yeah, I was so surprised.
Oh
Okay,
my God.
so
You okay? Do you want to take a minute?
mm, yeah, it looks like everything is okay. It stopped.
You sure?
Wow, yeah, it was like
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
This is a first
it's
for
not
us
very
as well.
often happen in Mongolia.
But if you need to go, you just say, I need to go, and we just reschedule to another time. Please don't
Yeah,
worry.
yeah, it's okay. Uh-huh.
Okay.
So, so where I was going. Yeah, and then in 2 months, I realized that I don't want to work, pursue my previous career, and I want to continue working for the art sector. And also, initially, we opened this commercial gallery, and in 2 months, we didn't make any sales. The funniest thing was this, and but I just wanted to continue. It was very big risk for me to continue with that situation, but somehow I felt like kind of confident that I can continue working for the art, and
Hmm.
I established the non-profit organization because it was impossible to sustain commercially. So I really hope that we could get some grants to support some artists and support our activities. So how my work started in art sector.
Thanks. And then the other thing that I wanted to ask, and then you mentioned your gallery project and then the nonprofit organization, and we're going to talk about it in a moment because it would be great to see some of the projects and how you've been thinking about creating a space for contemporary art where there isn't much, as you were saying before, necessarily. But one thing that I wanted to mention and to ask you is that for each one of these conversations of this online series, somewhat we want to see these individual conversations as an opportunity somewhat to learn not just about a specific curatorial methodology or methodologies that are ethical, that place an ethical approach at their center. But these are also very precious opportunities for myself, for everybody involved, really, to everybody watching and so on, to learn about different cultural, social, political, geopolitical, I would say, contexts, right, in which contemporary artistic practices are cultivated. So I assume that in this case as well, some of us might not be familiar with the context of Mongolia. Surely I am not. And also not just the national context, but also its connections across Asia and beyond, and also its history, as you were saying, as part of the Soviet bloc in a way. So I wanted to ask you, when it comes to contemporary art specifically, of course, but whether you can tell us a little bit about the context in which you started when you founded the gallery and sort of what your thoughts are about that, and also what are some of the specificities that you think are particularly relevant or meaningful, right, to the context, just so that also me and everybody else who's watching might be able to contextualize a little bit better sort of the projects that you've been starting and the endeavors you've been pushing forward. Right now, again, surely I do, but other people might also be missing a little bit of a bigger picture. So just what was the context when you started of contemporary art in the country?
Yeah, compared to many different countries, Mongolian contemporary art is relatively young because development started late 1990s. During socialist time, it was impossible to pursue different ways of expression than these socialist imposed surrealist art. And um, and most of the artists who are working in contemporary art, um, they are quite young, like maximum 50, and most of them are around 40 and 30s and younger. Um, Mongolia is a landlocked country sandwiched between Russia and China, uh, uh, between two these very big, powerful countries. And of course, we had lots of influence from both sides, from China and from Russia, especially during last in the past century. Mongolia was not a part of Soviet Union, but it Mongolia was more like a satellite, very heavily influenced by Russia. And of course, Russian influence was very strong during this 70 years of socialist period, and lots of traditional culture, um, traditional music, art, and culture were repressed during this time, prohibited almost. And so they imposed different their own culture. Mongolians stopped practicing traditional music and traditional religious practices, and so basically we have been going through a very different life during this time. And when I see contemporary artists of Mongolia, I see basically I don't really see Russian influence because artists are so young, and most of the artists grew up during this transition period, 1990s. So I see lots of traditional influence. Um, After the collapse of socialist time, Mongolian culture emerged very quickly. The Buddhism and shamanism and the other important cultures revived. And nomadic culture was always there in Mongolia and still existing. And it's very strong in our we are very strongly rooted in this culture, and I think how Mongolians are, we are today are very much shaped by this culture, and so I really see lots of influence in contemporary art, nomadic tradition, especially the shamanic rituals. And the materials found in nomadic surroundings, and the philosophies of our ancient tradition, and different methods of expression, like sound expression, especially. And I see lots of them in our. Oh, we can show some slides, Darin.
Yes, we definitely
I
can.
prepared, yeah, I prepared some slides to show.
Let's go with that. And also in the yes, and then we can start to also talk about then about the gallery, and then we can look also further about at the Venice project. But please guide us through this. If you want to go full screen with the PowerPoint, um, you can show us any image you want from this.
Yeah, so you're showing this, yeah?
Yes,
I
yes.
understand. Okay. So, um, in after 1990, Mongolians, not only just artists, also the whole all Mongolians, we are really started thinking who we are, and we try to understand the, the culture and tradition, and also we read the history in new way. We knew our history. We got to know our history in new way, because it was prohibited to talk about the Mongolian Empire of the 13th century, Chinggis, and so on. So, um, like, we were so much interested in understanding everything that we had in the past. So, the contemporary art reflected so much of our tradition and culture, but in very contemporary way. And so you can see here the performance of artist Inkbold. He's getting quite famous internationally. He was invited to quite many different important biennales, and he presented Mongolia first time in 2015, Mongolia in Venice Biennale. And we can go further. You can.
I can't. You have to control it. I
I
can't from here.
Okay. So, but okay.
You just go into the PowerPoint app. Yes,
Okay.
there you go.
So
There you
first
go.
I'm using this.
No
Yeah.
worries.
Okay. So this is performance in Korea he made. So basically, he uses this nomadic dwelling, and reminding him as remittance of the traditional nomadic dwelling, as a home for him, and he makes this kind of shamanic ritual, kind of the performance, interacting with items he brings for his performance, and also with this home-like piece of sculpture.
Yes.
And he also uses lots of materials found in from nomadic surroundings. One is very interesting. He uses horse dung for his abstract works, and the ash and other materials. And so you can see it's very organic and all natural looking.
Yes. Gantuya, I don't know if you're showing us other images, but the PowerPoint is stuck on the first image. So if you want to
really?
click, yes, if you want to click, maybe or
I stopped and
you can
I
share
can,
again if you want.
yeah, okay.
And then you can also show it as a full screen presentation. We will be able to see you anyway.
Uh-huh.
Let's try again.
Okay.
Here we go.
Yeah. So you can
yes.
see it. You
Yes,
see
yes.
this.
Now we
Okay,
can.
so
Yes.
this is the painting by artist Inkbold, abstract paintings, where he uses the materials found in nomadic the places, like a horse dung, sacks, and the ash, and so on. So,
And Gantuya, can I then also ask you, since we were talking about the gallery space before, I wanted to go back to that and ask you a little bit about it, and also if you want to show us some projects from that time. But just also to ask you as an overall question, because in 2012, as you were saying, you founded this art space, which is somewhat a unique institution in the context of the city and perhaps also the country, as you were saying before. And so you mentioned very briefly what brought you to be part of it or to develop it, but I also want to ask you. So I want to ask you what this project was, why it came about, but I also would like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your curatorial methodology for that, because there you were creating a platform for artists where there was not really a market, and it was also about curating the shows, and so it was quite a complex endeavor. And also with that, I want to ask you also how you managed to set your priorities, sort of what kind of processes did you establish to develop the work, the collaboration with artists, with collectors, the interaction with publics. It was really multi-layered, and as you were saying, in a context where there was not necessarily a path already there before. So I wanted to ask you, how did you decide to articulate such path to make way for this type of work?
yeah, when I entered to the art sector, I felt like I jumped into a swimming pool without knowing how to swim.
Okay.
So it was quite challenging. Um, and So initially, we really tried to get the fund from, try to work with the collectors in some ways to sell works of artists. And there was a very difficult challenge in task to somehow get the fund in different ways. Not only the donors, we have very little number of donors, and our ministry didn't really understand what was the contemporary art, and even general audience didn't have much understanding on the contemporary art, and it was in very limited circles. So I initially tried to engage, collaborate with the different um, collectors and the organizations which made the support of organization. But it was very difficult for me because most of these people didn't really understand and appreciate the contemporary art. Their understanding appreciation was very different from mine. So after a while, I understood that I cannot, I cannot really collaborate with these people because it was very hard then to convince them. So I just decided to do whatever what I want and what we want and what our artists want to show. It was very challenging period with the lack of financial resources, and we were living on very limited um, money, the
Mhm.
whole family, my family, I mean, and also the gallery barely managed paying its operation, cover its operation costs and so on. So we went through very challenging times, like for maybe 4 or 5 years, and but I just decided to go in. I decided to follow my own intuition. I just
Mhm.
didn't want to listen to other people, and it was better to me um, become friends with artists and work very closely with them, and we all become almost like a family. We understood each other very well, and we became friends, and we would drink together, and so our work becomes like kind of like family, or
Mhm.
like it's very informal. And our organization is was small, and still it's very small, and we just try to do what we like. And when we were doing in this way, we started having lots of visitors in our gallery, and this growth was very organic. And if we announce something, we could gather like 50 to 100 people very easily in 2 days. So um, when we make posts in social media platforms, we get like lots of interactions and communications and so on. So suddenly our place become very, very famous among, especially among very young generation after opening in how many years? In 3 years, 2, 3 years after opening. So we were quite happy, and so my approach is, it's just, it's very easy. Just listen to your heart, um, follow your intuition, and find the place, people who are close to you, and with whom you can collaborate. And so everything was so natural and organic, all communication, collaboration, and meetings and exhibitions. And so we just didn't know if we were working or not. Like everything was so organic. So even though we faced so many challenges, financial and many other challenges, time, energy, but we were very happy to work in this way. There was so many things that were making us happy. So I think the secret of our success was this. It's very simple, actually.
Thank you for this. Then I wanted to ask you, did you want to show any project from that art space, or do you want to talk about
Yeah, I
MCASA rather?
can. Yeah, I can show some images.
Great. I'm going to add it back. There we go.
So are we going?
Yes.
Are we showing now? Okay.
Yes, you're showing the red image, and then you can move it on your own. Yes, there we go.
Yeah. So I was talking about how we were using traditional elements for the contemporary performances. This is the sample how we used the throat singing, how we collaborated with throat singers for the performances. And so I go to the gallery. Oh, this is very interesting. So how artists used Buddhist art and philosophies, reflected philosophies into their artworks. So this artist Badatar in Olympia, here at school, we see a very different technique they're using, and mostly they use this technique to comment the contemporary world through the through the philosophies of the Buddhism. So this is our art gallery space. We moved 3 times. We changed the place 3 times. This is our first place. The exhibition we made in 2012, the year of establishment, is in 2015 in different place. This is the same place. Just show you how our exhibitions look like. This is our last place. This one the same, the last place.
So how many exhibitions would you have in 1 year? Like, what was the frequency, the density of the programming?
Yeah, roughly 12.
Okay.
Like once a month.
That's a lot.
So
okay.
Yes, maybe a little bit more, like 14, maybe 16. And also we had a lot of open discussions and the performances going on in line with exhibitions. So, so if you have any other question regarding the gallery.
I would love, well, no, with the gallery, I was curious just because, as you were saying, it was really about supporting also an emerging scene and a scene that didn't have a space before. So I was interested, and it's very nice also to see some of these images. The other thing that I wanted to ask you, because from how I've understood it through your words, through what I know about your work, was somewhat this need to have a project that would complement the work that you were already doing on the local scene, right? So working somewhat, yes, in the city, yes, in the context of Mongolia, but then working also with international collaborations and sort of giving this art the international visibility that you feel it deserved. And so that the next question goes, of course, to the Mongolian Contemporary Art Support Association, which is the other, this time, nonprofit organization that you created just to allow the country to have a presence at the Venice Biennale. And of course, we all know, we're very well aware of what the importance of the Venice Biennale is in terms of it's being a platform for visibility somewhat. But what I would like to ask you is not only what did you do, which we would love to see images and more. And then after that, I would like to ask you about the project you curated in particular in 2019, which I thought was brilliant. But so I want to ask you not just only what you did, but also in doing this project, how did you see Mongolian art fit somewhat this international mosaic that is the context of Venice? I feel that countries that didn't have a presence before always have to struggle to affirm somewhat a certain discourse, or to create even just a space for attention, a space for conversation, a space for exchange with artists and publics. So I wanted to ask you how you also worked to sort of introduce the practices that you've been cultivating in the country in the context of Venice, and also how you made sure that what you were presenting was somewhat properly understood, received by the international community of professionals and by local audiences, and what challenges you encountered. So many little questions, but just to cover what I guess it's a very complex arc of work, right? Of thinking, producing, presenting, and then engaging with the local context of Venice. And I'm going to launch the images again so that you can move around freely.
Are we showing images now?
Yes, yes, we can see
Okay.
them.
Okay. So, um, if you ask me, like, if I start it, and at this point, if I decide, um, okay, I I decided to stop what I was talking about.
As you prefer. We also
So,
are a space of negotiation of thinking, so you can backtrack and start in another
yeah,
direction.
yeah. So, I think I was speaking with myself too much, so I'm really having difficulty in speaking. Okay, so organization of a Mongolia participation in Venice Biennale was quite challenging in terms of finding finance for me. The
Mm.
most challenging was the biggest challenge was the finding a fund, but I was quite sure that Mongolian artists would have something to say for the audience of the Venice Biennale. It doesn't matter if it's very different from what they got used to see or not. Um, so so we went through quite difficult challenges of before starting this project, and somehow we managed with the mayor of the city to get the fund, and so we invited. Actually, there was a competition announced among Mongolian artists, and so two different artists were selected. So you see the exhibition, the first exhibition we had in 2015, Other Home, invited two different artists, Uning and Inkblot. Um, so I did really, I was not really afraid or worried about fitting into the Venice context or um, to have international standard or whatever, but I was quite sure that these two Mongolian artists were quite interesting enough, and they could say something very interesting through their works, especially reflecting the traditional culture and the philosophies into their work. So, um, so that was what I thought about entering, or my feeling when we entered into this um, platform. And the first exhibition was very highly received by many art critics, and we had lots of publicities and lots of interviews, and articles were written about our participation. Probably the first appearance was also important for that event. And I show you the second exhibition in 2017. We had the exhibition entitled Lost in Tingri, and it was about the Mongolia situation, the country lost between tradition and modernity, the globalization, and losing its own identity and um, so the challenges that we are facing today and people's greed and damage of the environment and so on. So that was the second project. Um, so let's go to the last one I curated in 2019. Um, it was quite interesting project, and it was kind of my dream to show this work for the Venice, and I invited the artist Jantsankhorol, who was graduating with a master's degree at UCLA, uh, University of California in Los Angeles, in majoring in art. And I really liked, he's a quite young artist, but I really liked his work. And he uses very contemporary materials, but his idea behind is very much Mongolian. Um, and so we decided to combine his very big sculptures with the sound performance. And so we invited throat singers, Mongolian throat singers, and we collaborated with Alpha Noto, Carsten Nicolai, artist from Germany, who is a sound artist, quite well known internationally. And we invited him to do this the performance, improvisation, and live performance in this very interesting the place we selected. And so the idea was the throat singing emerged. Uh, uh, Actually, nomads use this throat singing to interact with the nature and animals, and so I thought, what would be if we create human-made environment and very strange environment and see how this throat singing would, sound like, how artists would feel this environment, make this sound. So we discussed it with Carsten Nicolai, and he agreed to perform together with artists. And so how we started this project. And we made some rehearsals in Mongolia first, and then we went to Venice for the performance. So you see how our audience reacted the performance we made in our pavilion. It's how installations looked like in the pavilion. And then we made the performance in Palazzo Grassi. They invited our group to perform there, and you see how people are reacting or listening to the music, to the sound. So that was the last project I created. So I really liked the project once they made this performance in our place, because I I could feel this contrast, like, how it gets so busy in Venice. There are so many exhibitions and so many meetings, openings, and receptions, and people, the guests go so crazy with all of these happenings, and everyone rush into something. And interesting thing, what I realized was when people entered to our pavilion, they couldn't really rush because this sound could absorb you, and the environment absorb the people coming inside. And so people couldn't really move fast, like it's like kind of giving you opportunity to listen to yourself, sense the place and sense yourself, sense your body and mind. And so I that was actually the purpose of the exhibition, and we were very happy to see that the people's reaction and changes in their motion and the face and so on. So that was our last project. So I think the throat singing, the magic of throat singing was um, it's still very contemporary for us. Um, it's very alive, even it's very ancient, but it's very much alive, and it still works and interacts with you, and it makes you feel um, and changes your state of mind. So it's I think it was very good choice of combining this sculpture with this environment with this sound performance.
Thank you for this. It makes me think, it makes me reflect about also something that you were saying before. Uh, what you just said, it's also, I feel, at least for how I'm reading it, it's also about something that I tend to go back to a lot, which is the fact that there are multiple forms of knowledge and of sharing such knowledges, right? That could be, as you were saying, through sound, through bodies, through ways of feeling the body otherwise, and so on and so forth. And that is something that, although of course there are many curators and researchers and artists who work in this direction, but this is something that the space of the institution oftentimes confines, right? It's hard to have that depth of experience sometimes in the space of the institution. And I think it's very interesting because what you were talking about before, when you were talking about your training and the fact that you came from a different, somewhat, discipline, if you want to call it that way, is sort of thinking about all these different. And you were saying, I'm a young curator because you've started to curate more recently than maybe your biographical age, but then where does all of that experience that you have accumulated in your previous life, your first life, as you called it, where did that go? And so it's interesting to see how instead this form of understanding the world, of relating to others, this other intelligence that is a little bit more complex than just what is art, how to curate, how to work in an institution, comes in, I think, from the window, because it's about also having the life experience of understanding how to relate to others, how to speak with others, how to bring other people together in a way. This was just to say that you might be a curator who's been curating since the 2010 whatnot, but I wouldn't say that you are unexperienced because of that. You're experienced otherwise, maybe, and that's what probably makes it much more interesting in a way. But this was my comment on all the things that you just told us. We're about to run out of time. Um, we've received a lot of messages that compliment you and the work you've done. I will show them to you in a moment. But what I want to say is that because we're about to wrap up, if anybody has a question for Gantuya, please feel free to type it, message it, send it now, and then we will address it right away. My last question for this conversation is, of course, quite in a obvious way, if you want, in a banal way. I want to ask you about the future because you've been moving in this context and you've created space for artists, for conversations, for exchanges. I wanted to ask you um, which areas of work you see as urgent, somewhat at this stage of your path, and also of the context in which you work for the development really of artistic practices and curatorial work in Mongolia. And with this, I also mentioned that you said that you're planning on creating a new artist residency. So I wanted to also ask you about that and somewhat just to know what you're working on right now and what you see as next steps for all the incredible work you've been doing so far.
Yeah, the first thing, what I'm planning in the future is to establish residency, as you mentioned, in a Gir residence, Gir area. Um, you may know what is Gir. Gir is nomadic yurt, nomadic traditional dwelling. Um, and we have this suburban area in Ulaanbaatar where lots of rural immigrants live, moved with their own yurt, Gir, and live there. Uh, and so we are building residency in this area, and we are going to have two gear, quite nice, beautiful, traditionally made, and these two gear can accommodate 6 artists, and we would like to make it an international residency, and so every artist would come and stay in this place and do their own research, and also we would ask them to do something in that area. In that way, we would like to make certain area as a gear district, as a art district. In 4 or 5 years, we would like to see a certain area as a art district. So this is my plan, and I think it's very important for international artists to visit different places, especially places with very different cultures, to understand what is behind this culture. And of course, artists express themselves using the materials they find in their um, in their lives. So, of course, artists have same feelings, the fear, whatever hatred or love or tranquility, whatever. But the expression is different, and because expressions are different, it's most expressed through what we have in our lives, what kind of materials that we have, and so because of that, I think there are difficulties to understand this the language of expression, and so to understand the language of expression and also understand the different culture, what is behind, I think artists need to visit each other and work together, and so in this way they learn a lot from each other. So I think our residency program will help a lot in this way. I show you very quickly. Is the presentation still in share?
Now it is. It's back on, so we can see it.
Can you show now?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, so this is the nomadic tent. What I'm talking about. We recently implemented one project in the area where these rural migrants live, and so we created lots of works, and we would like to continue this kind of activities in this area. So we don't have planned to open our gallery yet. We don't know yet when we are going to open the gallery, but for sure we are going to continue with this residency program and organizing different activities in this area. So I think I find it much more interesting than running the gallery actually. So
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so very much for showing all of this. In the meantime, I'm just going to show you very briefly some of the comments that we have received. Oh, and also, so Lynn, the one question that we got a little while ago, I'm going to just show it on the screen so you can see it, was from Lynn, which was somewhat echoing what we had been discussed before, and was asking you if you could talk a little bit more about how the experience as an economist has informed your curatorial practice. We only have 2 minutes, but I think we can do it if you want.
probably helped in writing financial reports. It's very important. So most of the cultural workers they really struggle in writing financial reports and also the budget, composing the budgets. Probably it was a very easy part for me.
So having that sort of clarity of thinking when it comes to how administer resources and all of that, I guess.
But as a mathematician, I think the mathematics really helped me in understanding art. Um, I was very good in geometrics, and I think it really helped me in understanding perspectives and sensing the perspectives and also spaces. And algebra is so much about the abstract, link it with the abstract. So I think all these are so much associated, and I think it helped really much, much more than economics in sense of art, in terms of art.
Thank you so much, Gantuya, for this. And I'm just going to be super quick in showing you some messages of appreciation that came through from people who know your work and really are very interested in what you've been doing. Another one from Nona, who I guess is going to reach out to you through us. One thing that I would like to say for those who have been messaging is that we're always very, very happy to act as bridges. So here and on the page of callforcurators.com/talks, you can find the links that relate to the projects we've been discussing. Here we go. And most importantly, this is the email address. If you want to reach out, we will be happy to pass on your message and your question to Gantuya. And again, here is where you will find the full recording of this. with this being said, Gantuya, thank you so very much again. And we will continue to follow your work. Thank you again for this.
Thanks so much for the invitation. Sorry for my very broken Mongolian English.
It was perfect. It
I have
showed us.
really difficulty, much worse than before.
No, please do not worry at all. We really appreciate it, as I said before, your time and knowledge. So thank you so much for this. Also because it's 1:30 a.m. where you are. So we will let you go to sleep now. Thank you again and take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.